Welcome back to Squawk Box. We're going to talk about what's happening overnight in China because the country there announcing $1.4 trillion in stimulus over 5 years. Joining us right now on how that stimulus will impact investments in China. Meanwhile, by the way, we should say the Hang Seng and a number of the index is down. Want to bring in China Beige Book COO, Shehzad Qazi. Qazi, I want to get that right. So what does this really mean? I would have thought that that kind of number, you'd have things flying in a sort of David Tepper style way, but not the case.
No, not at all. Look, this is not the stimulus that markets were looking for at all. This is not stimulus, I think, to begin with. What they're doing is recycling debt. And we've seen this playbook in China over and over again. I don't think this does anything to actually stimulate growth, not at least in a way that's going to be meaningful for markets.
So when you say they're recycling debt, what do you mean?
Well, what they're doing is Italian local governments, you can now go out there and issue more bonds and take all this hidden debt, bring it onto the balance sheet, and then some more. Some of the debt that's owed by the local governments will get transferred onto the central government's balance sheet. So they're just moving the money around. That's great. Brings out, your interest rate payments and so forth, perhaps, and gives you some more money to maybe pay workers who haven't been paid, but doesn't do much.
What is your gamble on the next 12 months in China?
Yeah.
Mr. Tepper, I just referenced him, was sitting here, and that week he called it right. Things have gotten more complicated since then.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think a lot of those calls were actually probably not as right as they sounded at the moment. You haven't gotten a bazooka-style stimulus out of China. You don't have anything that's happening that is going to really stimulate growth. You don't have a muscular housing rescue package. You don't have a household-focused stimulus program at all. And I don't think it's happening no matter what happens in the next 12 months. The prospects of a trade war as of Tuesday, just skyrocketed, obviously. What I think is happening here is that you got Beijing reserving some of that fiscal power and saying once the trade, if this kicks off and really starts hitting us, then we move in.
So, let's talk about the trade war, the impending trade war. In your mind, what does that look like? How does that play itself out? Walk us through the sort of the decision tree here of what could happen.
Well, look, I think the Trump folks are more or less already working on what the plans could look like for the president on day one, right? And how big they want to go. And those debates are starting now. It's all very, very live. Now, we're going to find out once, of course, Trump takes office, what the actual priorities are and how soon he starts making those announcements. But the announcements, of course, could be very staggering, could be very dramatic and very bold, which will have a very real market reaction. We'll see what the actual economy, impact on the economy is. And I think that's where China is stepping in. And they're saying, we will provide the money to our manufacturers, to our factories, as they've already been doing, by the way, to help cushion the blow. So they're going to keep that stabilization effort going.
How should investors, one of the most owned companies in America and one of the most successful companies in America is called Apple. And they have a huge manufacturing reliance on China. What do you think the impact, how would you even think about that right now?
So there's been a target on the back of American companies for a while. And I think when we talk about China's retaliation, outside of doing things like putting their own tariffs, which I don't think mean much in the larger scheme of things, they could go after American companies. And so who do they go after? Do they go after Apple? Or do they say, forget about this? There's a whole bunch of medical equipment and pharmaceutical production happening in China that the Americans rely on. We're going to start disrupting those supply chains. So they could really pick, how hard they want to hit us. Their toolkit is limited overall. We've got a lot, bigger arsenal, but they could still cause a lot of pain.